week. We also worked with a continuum of care on looking at homeless needs and as well as Arlington economic development on the workforce training needs in the county. So from there, we next drafted the housing and community development needs, the goals, and the strategies, which I'm going to walk through. And then we can have a discussion questions around them. So the three priority needs should look very familiar. They largely remain the same. The first need is affordable housing that continues to be a priority need. So this is looking at the protection of rental and home ownership, home improvement, and resident services. The narrative changed slightly to include some recent results of the home ownership study to take a little bit more focus on that home ownership piece. The second is economic self-sufficiency and well-being, and this specifically relates to barriers to employment, financial stability, public health, and youth services. So a lot of what you guys CDCAC sees, especially for the proposal reviews. Third need identified is sustainable neighborhood, which is identified as a low priority. The other two were high, and this revolves around some of the work that our division does as far as physical conditions of the neighborhoods, neighborhood cleanups, that type of thing, and community engagement with the residents, letting people know rights and responsibilities, that type of thing. So moving on to the next slide, goals and strategies, and Caitlin has this handout, I believe, so maybe it might be better to look at it from there. So goal one, only change we're proposing the affordable housing goal is to remove the energy efficiency detail to the rehab of existing CAP strategies there. So this continues to include increasing the supply of committed affordable units, improving owner-occupied housing, and assisting households become first-time homes.
And just to clarify, I'm assuming you're removing that language so that it doesn't touch the
trigger any.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanting to make sure we weren't no longer.
We're still fans of energy efficiency.
Right.
We still like it. We just aren't going to say it.
Just wanted to make sure.
We still support it, but
Yeah.
you know.
Yes, just wanted to make sure.
But I was also gonna say, like, I mean, in terms of anything that's been built or rehabilitated in 10 years at least, it's kind of by nature.
Yeah,
It's happening, right?
Like,
Yeah.
we're with the priority for everybody, but like, there's not as much of a need
yeah.
to do anything about it.
Yeah. So
And also, we just probably should talk.
I'm perfectly fine with her removing it, so we're not pushing buttons then.
All right, moving on to goal two. So this is where we had the most changes, and this is largely because we incorporated goal 4 into goal 2. Remember, goal 4 was foster vibrant, sustainable neighborhoods. We also merged some of the strategies, such as moving strategy 3, reduce barriers to employment, into strategy 1. So that now it just reads reduce barriers to employment by providing job training, skills development. It's a little cleaner, easier. Foster micro and bias and development remains strategy 2, so that didn't change. Strategy 7, increase individual and family health and well-being, was merged into strategy 3. It now reads increase household stability by assisting families to build assets, strengthen connection to resources, and improving long-term health. So we thought that was a little bit cleaner and reduced the number of strategies there. Strategy 5, reduce barriers to digital technology. Broadband internet was removed. The next strategy, support increased educational attainment for youth and families, remains the same. And the last two strategies were added from the now deleted goal 4. which includes educate residents on housing issues and provide technical assistance referrals, and physically improve neighborhoods. We felt that those two goals largely capture what we're doing now as far as the neighborhood goal of goal 4. So I don't had any quick thoughts on this one before we move on. We do have some discussion questions around these, but while people are looking at them, this one in particular had a lot of changes. So, people, any thoughts?
Is broadband another thing that we need to avoid?
No, but the county's doing a lot around digital equity right now. And there's actually a new digital equity grant program. And so we felt it didn't necessarily need its own call out here just because there's a lot of resources that are available. And then a lot of the programs that we would come in for funding anyway could fit into some of these other buckets as like a training program, skills development program. But no, it's not one of the trigger words. I'm just wondering.
So I just have a question. For number 6, under physically improved neighborhoods. What is that looking like?
So this mostly covers our housing outreach program, which does cleanup events as part of the sort of community neighborhood outreach strategy. So our housing outreach coordinator does 2 cleanup events a year. That program is funded through CDBG, and it's essentially removing debris and unwanted household items in target neighborhoods. So he does one in Arlington and he does one in Green Valley. And so it could be other, there's been suggestions in the past to do more on the sort of, infrastructure side with our CDBG funding. We haven't really ever explored that to the point where we would actually fund anything, but if we did, it could fit into that priority.
A lot of other communities use this for things like sidewalks.
Sidewalks,
Yeah, so we've never.
Yeah, I've lived in communities where they've used it for sidewalks. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So,
That program in Arlington where the community puts in the proposal for the.
Yes.
I forget what it's called.
Neighborhood conservation.
How is that? Where does the funding come from? That's not.
No, I don't know exactly.
That's through the biannual CIP, the capital improvement program.
But like that kind of checks that box.
Yeah.
It does,
So
and we've actually talked about collaborating over the years. And years ago, we actually, if you drive through the intersection of Glebe and Pershing and you notice all the awnings, that was actually a neighborhood conservation project that was funded through CDBG. So we've talked about that. Like, the thing is, it needs to sort of align because the neighborhoods design their own, it's not called the neighborhood programs. They design their own neighborhood plan, I guess. And it would have to be one that would be income eligible under CDBG if we were to fund it, and it would have to be now. So we've talked about doing that, but we never have. But this would cover that if we ended up kind of looking into that.
Neighborhood Advisory Commission, or whatever it's called, is it still in existence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very active. They're really looking at kind of ways. They restructured the program a couple of years ago. So
It's really tricky to do this type of work with CDBG because you have to kind of qualify the area. You have to figure out a way to prove that it's benefiting low and moderate income people. So the way that most communities do it is through area benefit, which is basically saying like this neighborhood is predominantly low mod income. We have very few of those in Arlington. So it really kind of would have to be the right fit, and we haven't been able to figure out how to make that work.
That's what I see in this change where goal 4 is removed. 1, 2, and 3 are all very people-based, right? You can
Yes.
clearly like identify a beneficiary and determine that, yes, they are income eligible. Foster vibrant neighborhoods, it's a little harder for the reasons you just
Right.
outlined, yeah.
And if an appropriate project came along, we can always amend the consolidated plan too. I mean, we're always open to sort of looking at new ways to help improve neighborhoods.
Anyone have any other questions? On to,
Yeah, goal 3. So the only change to the homeless goal is the removal of for homeless persons with disabilities for strategy 1. So the strategies are provide permanent supportive housing, rapidly rehouse homeless persons through case management and or rental subsidies, prevent households from becoming homeless, and provide emergency housing for persons who are not able to be diverted. Again, so wording, yes,
Mhm.
word's nothing. And as I noted, goal 4 was deleted and merged with goal 2. So we are getting close. We're in the home stretch here. So we'll publish the draft next month and advertise it to get feedback on it. Back here for review in April before the board considers it, and then submit it to HUD in May.
To me, this looks clean and appropriate. Particularly when we talk about funding justification and implementation. So even though you changed a lot, you did a good job.
I think one of the things that this also reflects is, and this will kind of segue into our next, to our questions. But there, we had kind of talked about at the needs hearing in September, you know, whether we wanted to kind of narrow in on priorities or kind of keep things broad so that we can, you know, figure out how to prioritize each year. And it seemed to us that the committee was interested in kind of keeping things broad and then seeing where things shake out in a. So that's kind of how we approached it, and not really tweaking things too much, but just kind of reorganizing, clarifying, and you know, making it so that it flowed a little bit better, I guess.
At the same time, making it saleable and manageable.
Okay, so do we want to move into the discussion questions? Okay. So, I mean, the first one is pretty broad. So, and we talked a lot about this already, but I guess you all feel like, oh, no, I don't have any others. This, there, all the questions are there. Do you feel like we're on track as far as these revised goals? So just whatever we just went through as far as the goals and the priorities. And if you had to tweak anything else, what would it be? Is there anything that's missing, I guess?
Meaning like, does this revised set of goals kind of align with what we just saw in terms of the proposals? Because we have to
That, but also,
work in
you know,
funding, but
yeah, that, but also like what, I mean, I think you can use that context, like what the proposals that we reviewed in the fall, but also, you know, just what you've seen or heard in the community, what you're, you know, what we talked about during the needs hearing. Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of any proposal that we've seen in the years I've been doing this that we wouldn't be able to justify under this set of goals.
Okay.
So Link mentioned mental health. Is that something we should call out or do, because I know that's come up quite a lot. I guess A, is that appropriate to be in here? And B, if it is, should we be more explicit in our self-sufficiency goals?
Is there not other organizations responsible for that?
I mean,
My personal opinion is it's not a great fit under consolidated plan, but I mean, it could be, I guess.
I think where you see a lot of that is DHS programs with the homeless, so it does fall within that goal. We're not specifically funding it, but DHS is dealing with those issues.
And I think a little with the people being citizen and coming out of, where they've been locked up for years or whatever, they're coming out and they're told they have to go to a halfway house and not they'll go with their families immediately. I think that's a problem, but it's a more of a readjusting to the life on the outside with the family. Depends on what the family life is like before they move in.
Seemed like a lot of the proposals we heard, the direct goal wasn't to improve mental health, but it was more of like a.
Resources.
Yeah, like it was kind of something that would, that happened
Secondary
because of
outcome.
their goals, or I'm trying to think, like an indirect benefit. I'm trying to think back to like.
But like, and it's here, like, number 3, under goal 2. Strengthening connection to resources and improving long-term health. That's.
Yeah, it would be
I
really.
think it would fit there. Yeah, I think it's sufficient, and I think it's like Jennifer said, I think we have to sort of keep a tricky line there. For what's appropriate for CDC, so I think that works.
Okay. Yeah, we've always tried to sort of stay away from the safety net kind of programs with this money. And we don't have to necessarily, but yeah, it feels like there's other funding sources for that. And our focus has really been on kind of developing economic self-sufficiency and more of the sort of long-term stuff. And we haven't always been great about it, but I don't know, given that the funding is decreasing, I guess I'd like to stay away from the safety net stuff to the extent we can, because that's, you could just spend all your money on that.
Yeah.
And not that it's not important.
Anything else that think of that needs to be included and isn't already? And this is not like your only opportunity to, if something, comes to mind, but volunteer for fun.
My answer to that is no.
Okay.
However, I still have a concern. Think back 50 years when we had mental problems. We typically, they shoved them into hospitals for help. And then it was too expensive, so we closed the hospitals and we put them on the street. And the next generation, maybe not the same people, but another generation, are pretty much back on the street. Not necessarily what we find in New Year's. We've always had about 300 people who have no homes and live on the street. And there used to be an audit.
The county still does that.
And it's amazing and frightening to me in such a healthy, wealthy, well-organized county that there's still that many people. And I would submit that most of those are not there because they want to, because they don't have the intellect or something. If you could eliminate them, that would be perhaps helpful, but that's not the approach. And it seems to me they're still on the street. Is there something we can do, and I'm beginning to feel it doesn't belong in CDCAC. But I'm concerned that it's just not being, I'm unaware of it being addressed at all.
It definitely, the county does a lot around homelessness, I think. What was it? What year did we achieve functional zero? Jennifer, was that 3 years ago?
Functional Veteran Zero 2015, and then I think we're aiming for Functional Zero. So I'm just wondering, actually listening to you talk, like, would it be helpful to have, so it's called the Continuum of Care, is the sort of that it's run by the Department of Human Services and then all the nonprofits that work in the homeless world. It might be helpful to have them come kind of talk about some of the work they're doing. There are still homeless people, there are still issues for sure, but there's a lot going on. It might be helpful for you guys to learn more about that.
If it's relevant to the mission of this group, yes.
I think it would be, because one of the goals of the consolidated plan is to address homelessness, and
That's goals.
Okay.
yeah, no, I think maybe let's do that. I think that would be helpful, because it as Caitlin said, there's a lot going on. There's a lot more that still needs to be done. And in the federal space right now, it is kind of nuts what's going on with some of the rules and the funding around homelessness. So I think it would be helpful for everybody to kind of get a little more up to speed on that stuff too, depressing though it is.
A lot of people, these homeless people, you hear about Arlington County, a lot of them are migrating from other places coming here because they found out about how good they're treated over here up
Yeah,
first.
yeah,
So now
yeah.
we're being overpopulated. Like 20 years ago, when the Metropolitan Police would get the paddy wagon and haul them all, people off the street, bring them to Arlington, put them out right there in Crystal City till they got caught. But like I said, it's it's a lot of crazy things going on, and now with the funding and different things.
I mean, that speaks well for Arlington.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard that other jurisdictions send homeless people to us because we do have a lot of resources, but anyway.
Good, thank you.
All you have to do is ride the bus or the train sometime, but the bus, the Arlington bus, the art bus, you'd be surprised if they just listen to the people that get on there. Got a big sign on there saying they're required. They get on there and walk right on. The bus driver doesn't fuss with anybody about where's your money or anything. They just walk on there and they get on the bus, and you can tell they're homeless because you listen to the conversations they're having with each other about, I'm trying to prove that I'm still being responsible for this, and they talk about where they're trying to improve themselves and resources they're using. But
My heart says that that's wonderful,
yes,
but my mind says they're violating something that shouldn't be violated. We ought to help eliminate.
I agree.
We have as a society, and I recently learned when I was in Dubai, I talked to people, executives from 19 different countries, and every one of them had the same problem of the newer generations not conforming. They're interested in themselves rather than the common good. And that is a recipe for a societal failure. You go back in history, it's always been a failure. When can we start enforcing the legally adopted laws and procedures? I think it only takes determination. A lot of resistance, because when you're on the dole for generations, you don't even understand what it is to conform.
My personal opinion, I think, politicians that are they holler to get in there. I'm for my people, I'm looking out for my people, they're not looking out for anybody but themselves.
Now, politicians have joined that crowd,
Yeah,
which said it's up to us to elect the people who will be responsible. But we haven't been doing that.
So we will, try to get some folks from the COC here to talk about, what the county is doing as it relates to homelessness prevention, but, to kind of veer back to where we were. Why don't we move on to question 2, maybe, talking about sort of, and a lot of these next questions are kind of about like the structure of our NOFA and prioritizing and things like that. So I wanted to get your input on that, since that was something that we kind of had tabled when we talked about the NOFA in the spring. So
Sure, yeah, so it's, as Caitlin said, this gets a little more specifics. You did a good job of teasing out some of these questions based on the conversation you guys have had. But should we identify new funding priorities each year or maintain consistent priorities for all 5 years? I think we've guys talked a little bit about keeping it broad, but I think you've also talked about kind of narrowing in on what's, how can we use our money for the best bang for the buck? So is that something you would entertain as like getting together each year, looking at a new funding priority based on some kind of emergent need? Or do you kind of like how it's going now, which gives you, that more flexibility with how, what comes in, what's coming in versus, kind of targeting the NOFA to get what you want. So there's kind of trade-offs, right?
That's what I was gonna say, it's like, and this came up, as you mentioned, Caitlin, in our discussions about the NOFA revisions, but I think unless we get out ahead of it and say, here are the priorities this year, prior to when people are doing their grant application, so that they know, everyone knows that the priority is this, because otherwise we're sort of, we're beholden to whatever comes through. So we could set our priorities all we want, but if no programs come through under those priorities, then something else. So I know that doesn't answer the question, but if we're going to identify new funding priorities, we got to do it up front.
yeah, it would have to be, like, if we were to do that, we would have to do it like in May or June each year before we release the NOFA, to kind of give people a heads up, like, we're only gonna fund legal services this year, not like saying.
And I think then there would also need to be probably a bit more marketing that would need to be done.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we know that there are enough programs out there to do the thing that we're prioritizing unless we find them and market to them and say, hey, grant application, grant opportunity available. And then like, if there aren't enough, then we're faced with like, do we set this priority, so we feel like we have to fund along that priority, but these programs aren't that good, do we want to invest?
But using the current Minnesota's issues, there needs to be oversight.
What do you mean by that?
I believe the identified fraud should have been identified rather than a slow gravity toward it.
Are you talking?
Well-
Yeah, so we monitor these programs. So no matter
Right.
what we fund, we would monitor them. I think the question is more about, should we say, wow, an emerging need we see coming for next year is whatever, mental health or job training, and so we want to focus on that. So it'd be kind of, currently our 5-year plan is broad, and then each year we can be sort of more broad. And we've talked about this for years. Like, on the one hand, that's great because you can provide stability for organizations, you can, fund a broad swath of things, but then it doesn't really give you the opportunity to be really specific in any given year if you see something coming. So I guess that's sort of the trade-off we're asking you to talk about.
Well, and I think one question is whether if we say yes, we like to have the flexibility to prioritize on an annual basis. But if there aren't obvious emerging priorities, so like, for instance, like under current circumstances, I might be inclined to, you know, be a little bit more interested in homeless priorities because they may be getting a ginormous hit and that could be problematic. So, but if that weren't the case, for whatever reason, and it was just, you know, things are kind of going along the same status quo, then I don't know that I would want priorities. So if we can structure it in a way that can kind of have the best of both worlds,
So what if we establish
Then
that not at the NOFA stage, but at the like, well, I don't know what the right word is, like the marketing stage, where when does the NOFA come out? Like
July, yeah.
So I don't know, in April, we sit down and say, what are we seeing? What priorities, right? And instead of, you know, establishing that, we think about like, okay, what programs do we know about that exist that address that priority? Make sure they know about this. Let's kind of like stack the deck of applicants in a fair legal way and just say, you know, then more of that type of program potentially applies and we have more of a option to fund those programs under that priority without like ever really publicly stating that that's our priority so that we can get out of it if no good programs. I don't know.
Yeah, I like where your head's at. I worry about getting pushback from applicants.
From who?
From applicants, if we kind of went that route.
It's a little bit behind closed doors.
Yeah, I think we would be, I think that maybe that some folks would think that isn't as transparent as maybe they would want us to be. But I mean, I think we could maybe think about how to best do that.
well, the two questions I have is one, does the county at any level, and I don't know whether this is at the board level or, and I don't know through what mechanism or anything, do they sort of talk about priorities for annual priorities of any kind? And so that we could, you know, sort of follow in a similar suit in any way. And then my second is how does this juxtapose with the discussions that we had around, you know, are we trying to encourage, you know, back to that question, and where's Steve when we need him, right? But of like, are we trying to encourage new players in the field, or are we trying to, you know, continue to support those that have relied on us for a long time, or some combination of the two? Because I think if it's the first one, then that may be problematic in combination with the prioritization, because then you may be
I've sensed.
not doing that.
But can I?
I think McCoy and Wendy both have hands up.
Just, can we give, because they've had their hand up for a minute, just want to give them an opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Because I know annually that not insignificant amount of work goes into setting the goals, strategy, and priorities. And I imagine it makes sense. Like most of the priorities can stay pretty consistent. I like the idea of monitoring for emergent opportunities, but then there's also more longer term goals like the 2040 affordable housing goal. And how do we monitor our priorities consistently against that, so we're not going to change that as often, but what strategies maybe need to change if we're not achieving it, things like that. And I'm sure you're thinking about that across the county. So I'm a favor of relative consistency with a buffer for some of those emerging opportunities, like maybe not bottom of the list because it's less important, but just because there's a focus for the next couple of years and it takes time and money to solve some problems or explore opportunities, but we still need to be able to react to when things change. So that's my 2 cents on the issue.
I've sensed that the new chair of the county board in their first talk to the county is given the opportunity to set new priorities. Sometimes they're incidental, sometimes they're big. So I think the leadership of the county does exercise periodic adjustment of their priorities, which filters out throughout.
I would say that, yes, they do that, but I don't think there's anything that's sort of in the context of what you were
No,
asking.
that's true. And unfortunately, independent.
Yeah. Margaret, did you have, or sorry, Wendy, sorry, Wendy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, uh, I share some of McCoy's feelings. I feel like if you're really trying to move the needle on something, that you need to stick with it for a couple of years. And I wonder if we're just sort of like an Up, right? Where you're like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. Where we're just every year we're chasing something that's a brand new issue. And so I remember right at the beginning this year, we were like, oh man, we really need to focus a lot on immigration and immigration law and assistance there. I mean, that's clearly still something I think that's a priority. But to really move the needle, I feel we need to be relatively consistent in where we're putting our dollars. If we believe as a group that we're trying to move the needle on something, if, as Margaret was saying, right, we're just trying to sucker these nonprofits and just keep them running because we feel like just the day-to-day work that they do is sufficient and important, then we can continue to do that. Or is there something like homelessness or health or, housing, first-time housing that we really, really feel we could move the county in a great direction if we prioritize that funding for a series of years. Thank you.
Jennifer, did you want to make a comment?
I did. I agree with both McCoy and Wendy. I come from a nonprofit background and it's really hard to have like sustainable money. And I think the fact that, it would pain me to be like, we're going to fund you 1 year, but next year we're going to go fund those people, because by the time you get your program up and running and you get the finance, I think we should encourage financial sustainability, but that makes me nervous. But what I was actually going to say was, so Alexandria, the city of Alexandria recently did a study on their grant program, and they just released a new RFP, which we should share with you guys. But the way they addressed this question I thought was pretty interesting, which was their like regular size grants, which are like 15 to 70,000, something like that, were sort of ongoing grants for organizations with capacity. And then they had what they called, I think, mini grants and incubator grants that were like 10,000 or below. So that was for the like new funding priorities, the new organization. So they sort of split it from they looked at various priorities, but they also split it from a like ongoing versus new and incubator, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. So we can send that to you guys if you want to weigh in on that kind of approach too, or if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm super curious about that. I think
Yeah,
it's
I like
an interesting way to support new ideas.
I wonder if like what's the one that's actually 2 years worth of funding, if like an incubator grant could. It's small, but it's $10,000 each year for 2 years to give them a little bit of runway
Mhm.
to do something with it.
Yeah.
It's an approach that works.
Yeah.
So did we come to any consensus after all this discussion?
Well, what do you guys think? I mean, it kind of sounds like we're moving in the direction of remaining consistent, but
I think so. I
okay,
think so.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense, and it would make administratively, it's much easier to manage this process. So,
And again, it's not like in 2 years, if some big thing comes up, we can't change this. I mean, we're really just, this is our 5-year plan, but we have an action plan every year. We can always amend.
all right, so let's move on to the next question, and this is kind of gets a little bit more focused about how we prioritize. In some of the data that we looked at for the market assessment and needs analysis, some of the things that we noticed and it's not, unlike other previous needs analyses that we've done, but there are concentrations of cost burden issues and poverty in certain neighborhoods. And so our question is, should we be prioritizing based on geography? Just given those higher concentrations of, barriers in some neighborhoods. So, I'm not sure exactly what this would look like. And we used to have some focus on what we call neighborhood strategy areas. And we don't necessarily use that name anymore to sort of define which neighborhoods we focus on. But we do have some programs like our housing outreach program that, does some specific work in these neighborhoods. So I guess, our thinking is that prioritization could address some of these equity gaps that we've seen. And, we do get quite a few proposals that focus on programs in certain neighborhoods like Green Valley. And should we be weighting those types of programs higher because of some of the concentrations of poverty and cost burden that those neighborhoods currently have? I think.
When you have disparities and problems, you should focus on it. Not to exclusion of others, but to be aware of. It's too easy to kind of ignore the most needy and move on. And yet, isn't that collectively our responsibility to meet everybody's need? Not wish would be. I'm sure.
The geography portion in the
Application.
yeah, the application process. And I think we even talked a few times about like, where is this organization based? Who are they serving? How far do the people that they're serving have to travel? Like, I think we talked about that a lot. And so I think maybe we were doing that without realizing we were doing it. Like, I remember in a lot of the, like the after school programs, we were talking about like where they're based, who they're serving. So I think we kind of already like did that a little bit. So that, I don't know, that just made me think of that.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
Then somebody's already baked in because of the people who are being
so they're
served.
serving. Yeah, I sort of think I think adding some other layer of some kind of prioritization, first of all, I can't truly figure out entirely how we would do it beyond what we're already doing. But I think it'll just make it more cumbersome and not have a lot of payback.
Okay.
Well, because it's really hard, like the range of geographies of these beneficiaries, it's everywhere from the people who live in this building, in this location, all the way to our program covers 22204 and 22206, like, and everywhere in between.
Yeah, like Vienna.
Right,
Well, and some of the programs are self-selecting.
right.
So how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Like, if it's a job training program and it's whoever comes to them, I mean, yes, you could say your marketing and blah, 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 but I think that's what's baked into those two questions, the geography and your need. So
Wendy, did you want to share something really quickly?
Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting myself. So, my answer to 3 is no, because we do that already through income qualifications and who we're required to serve through the funding.
That's fair.
I agree with Link, yeah, when he said, women, whatever the priority at the time is what we're looking at, not what neighborhood it is.
Okay.
And for funding, the state of Virginia is, I believe it's gonna be one of the next Minnesota fraud things with the surplus money and the funding. Or is this, all this surplus money we have, what are they doing with it, you know? And how are you getting it? Because there's a lot of things they're coming up with to get money off of the taxpayer I don't feel that's fair. One of the things that I've victim of myself is a SR22 driver's license thing. I couldn't afford insurance on my car, so I parked my car and called the insurance company and say, hey, I'm not going to drive my car for a couple months. I know you're going to have to suspend my insurance. They called DMV, who suspended my license plate, which I didn't have a problem with. They suspended my driver's license too. My driver's license didn't say I was a bad driver, just said I don't have insurance. But they charged me $745. Now, there was a whole lot, when I went down to pay it, there was a whole lot of people in there for the same thing. And I said, wait, this is a lot of money. Mine, SR22 is for bad drivers, not people without insurance. I wasn't trying to avoid, you know, it's like, wait a minute, you're gonna punish me regardless.
Yeah.
That's part of the General Assembly doing stuff like that.
Why did you think?
Yeah, like people said, I know we have considered the population already in applications, so it's already implicitly there. But I know that Arlington is still relatively segregated, so it's helpful to keep in mind where the money's going and how it's addressing that. And when it comes to housing, for instance, if there's ways we can think about, or if opportunities arise to expand, like where affordable housing might also be, could definitely spread the level of opportunities across the county. So I know we focus on those more high opportunity areas where there seem to be greater need. But I think the affordable housing example of it could probably be that burden could be shared across the county. We have to keep those type of opportunities in mind as well.
So the Affordable Housing Master Plan, which is yet another plan that we administer that sort of guides our housing policy, does have geographic distribution goals. So whenever we're looking at affordable housing, we do definitely focus on that. And when we release a NOFA for that funding, people get extra points depending on neighborhoods and stuff. So, but I think you're right. It's always important to kind of consider.
So what I'm hearing though is that as far as the way we prioritize programs through our grant process, we don't necessarily want to be considering geography as sort of, prioritizing certain neighborhoods rather.
Yes.
The way we are currently doing this
Yeah,
is sufficient.
The justification is really, we're focused on the needs of the people, not the place. Right, like,
Yeah.
regardless of where they live, though many of them happen to live in the places that need the focus.
Okay. We want to go on to the next question. Do you want to take this?
Sure. So the next kind of couple of questions relate to funding structure goals.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'll get there. There we
So should we restrict funding to organizations that do not receive other county funding? So this I know has come up definitely when I've gone through the proposal review with you guys about, are they receiving other money through the DHS or the race grant? And so should that be taken into consideration? I think this is, I don't know how you envision this one being, but it's kind of another kind of two-parter there. So, what are your thoughts on developing consolidated community county funding process? So basically lumping everything kind of together, those different pots of money. And then a bigger issue be there, should we continue using CDBG for public services at all? We spend $250,000 to $300,000 a year on this. Should that be money going to affordable housing or something else where, we'll continue to use CSBG for, obviously, as the name implies, community services. So, but yeah, so there's a lot to unpack with that. But I think maybe just starting with the overall question on restricting funding to organizations that might already be getting large amounts of money from, or maybe not large, some other money from the county.
Certainly a good thing. I feel like the only way to truly consolidate would be to get everybody on the same funding schedule. And without that, I don't think that there'd be a way to really truly do a consolidated approach.
One measure to answer your question, it is the consistency. I'll have to come back to that. I forgot why key much, but
Okay.
But I also think, going back to what Jennifer said of, nonprofits are constantly trying to figure out where the next dollar is coming from. I don't want to be the one who's policing that. So I agree with you, Laura, that sort of knowing, kind of being aware of who's getting other funding, and we ask that question, where their other funding is coming from. And maybe we ask for a little bit more specificity than we tend to get, but I think they've got to figure out, they've got a hard enough job as it is, so.
Wendy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so, Caitlin, I always have something to add. So, should we restrict funding to organizations that not receive other county funding? No. And then for B, I believe that we should continue using CDBG for public services.
I would echo Wendy on B as well, and I would say, this is definitely not the year to be mucking with that.
Make the three of us.
You guys are surprising me tonight, honestly. Not expecting some of these answers. This is good though. This is really helpful for us.
I'll echo Wendy as well. In terms of should we consider no, B, yes, continue. I know, and I imagine you guys are already thinking about the funding process of like how reliant any nonprofit is on the county. But yeah, I don't see it as our responsibility in this committee to be thinking about that.
capacity to handle the funding should be a determinant factor in who gets it.
And Link, we do that, right?
Good.
I mean, that's part of their application packet and part of what we review and score. So, and I think it goes back to the other question about trying to move the needle on something. So if you're a nonprofit and you've got a really great program and you can glom together different funding sources, even if they're both include different sources within the county, then perhaps you have that opportunity, right? If you meet your goals and measures and the county reimburses you for what you've done, to really move the needle and make a real difference in the community. So I think if they have the opportunity to do that, we should let them see what they can do.
I
No,
mean,
I
these are
agree.
competitive funding opportunities, so if you can, and moving the race funding into a more competitive process sort of makes a case for like, you can win a bunch of money from different county sources, then yeah, good job.
When we are more focused on capacity than any of the other ones because we have to report to our federal funding partners. So part of why the race grant was actually created, now it's called the opportunities grant, I think was created, was because some of the smaller nonprofits just didn't have the capacity to take our money. So this way they can, you know, as they grow, they can maybe move to different funding sources and stuff too.
It's pretty
Okay.
resounding.
Yeah, that was great. No, I mean, I think this is helpful, and I mean, I think generally the consensus is that, you know, we don't want to be restricting, is what I'm hearing is that we don't necessarily want to restrict funding that to organizations that are already receiving other county funding. But you guys do care about, you know, what funding they're receiving. I think the thing that we really need to think about at the administrative level is how do we ensure that there isn't duplication in what we're providing funding for and what the other grant programs are funding for, as far as like, you know, we don't want to be funding the exact same thing and just making, and I think that we're working towards getting better at that. So, but that's on us. That's not on you guys.
When they apply, especially, funding from two different organizations, from two different county funding, if one part of the county funding say, well, we'll grant you $35,000 and the other one is only giving them $5,000, if you can apply for both and get the money you need, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. Just make sure they're using it for the proper thing, not just having a surplus of money.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So the next one is about funding pools. And this is something that we talked a little bit about last spring. And it's really kind of figuring out the best way to, you know, ensure that we are, you know, funding, you know, whether it's based on program type or priority or organization type or size. Does it make sense to kind of carve out, you know, like a certain amount of money or a certain percentage of our funding for a certain, you know, pool of applicants? There are other programs that do this. It's not uncommon to have, you know, a different pool. It would require applicants to kind of say, like, I'm applying for this pool of funding. But it would be a way to, you know, if we did want to say on, you know, maybe an annual basis, like, we think this priority area is really important, so we're going to carve out $200,000 from our overall budget to support this applications that are applying for this funding. I'm not saying that we do it that way. I'm just saying that could be an example of how it would work. Or, you know, there are other communities that, you know, have a pool of funding that is set aside specifically for new program ideas or smaller organizations that maybe wouldn't be competitive in the main funding pool, might have some capacity or operational challenges that makes them less competitive. But they've got a great program idea. So anyway, that's kind of what we're thinking here. We're just curious what you all think of that. And if you think it's a good idea, what would you sort of think would be the right way about going about doing that?
I'm definitely interested in the idea of that, like, in keeping your startup or something like that.
Yeah.
So that kind of funding pool. but I say no on a program type or priority.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
that's,
my initial thought is you guys have had enough time trying to like fit the funding sources into the programs and make it all work like that. I don't, we recommend a pretty wide range of programs every year, so that seems like enough to me.
that's, I agree. Just maybe take a look at what Alexandria is doing and see if a similar approach or modifying that approach
Okay.
works.
Another, I guess I should. Okay, there's another question that we had here that didn't, wind up on this. I'm gonna add it really quickly, so just talk amongst yourselves. I just realized it's not in here.
I'll just add for 5, echoing what was said about Alexandria. I think it's an interesting opportunity that I'm excited about. And it's not just in nonprofit space, just in general. It seems like there's a lot of winner take all. So having opportunities for smaller organizations that may not be as competitive against the tanks, I think is a really cool opportunity. And there's also part of me interested in seeing how our different pools of money for different priorities are getting certain types of results. Now I know that could add operational overhead, but finding some way to see how money within certain areas, like we have public services was asked about in 4B, seeing how that money is impacting the community in some way. I know those metrics can be imperfect, but that'd be interesting.
We did, at this September needs hearing provided some sort of 5-year impact numbers, but we can reshare that. And like you said, it's not perfect. I mean, it's numbers, so it's not really impact, but it, it gives you a sense at least.
Actually on the back of this sheet, and I'm sorry.
Oh, good.
Virtual. You don't have this, but I can email
I'm
it.
missing out. I intended to be there. If you could
Yeah.
email it, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll send it to you now. Okay, and so then the other thing that we were kind of thinking about here was, would this be a way to ensure equitable access for smaller organizations or, those that are serving historically marginalized communities or certain populations that don't necessarily have access to these types of programs historically?
I don't know if it does the second half, but I think it does the first half.
Okay.
So I think it definitely is a way we can provide more access to the smaller, less experienced and established organizations. But I don't know that that necessarily, in all cases, means that it's improving service to the historically marginalized. Because some of the bigger guys are doing just that. So
Yeah.
I don't know that they're mutually inclusive.
And who would those communities be defined as in Arlington? Because obviously that varies jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So is there I'm not familiar. Is there goals or specific groups that have been historically marginalized here that they have in mind?
That we have, do you mean as far as that don't necessarily have access to these programs or just generally?
I guess it's a 2-part question. Here we're talking about access. So access, there's an example of that.
So I think what we were thinking about here was, there are certain organizations that have applied for funding that, like we were talking about before, serve a specific neighborhood and generally, like for example, Arm in Arm. They have a very specific population that they serve, and they focus very, very intently on Green Valley. They work with young adult men. The same with the CYEP. They work with students of very specific schools. And in the past, there's been talk, in this committee in particular, and we haven't had this conversation in a few years, but, should we be trying to recruit more organizations like that are sort of focused on a very hyper-specific population that needs a lot of services? So that's kind of what we were trying to get at here.
Mm,
Well, the one thing that we didn't talk about that I think Jennifer had said at one point, we did have this program that was like specifically, and maybe this is part of the Alexandria incubator model, which was sort of, didn't you talk about, Jennifer, at one point we had like a, help them grow kind of program?
Yeah, the county used to run an,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like a TA cohort for nonprofits.
Yeah, and that's what I think also may be missing from here is some sort of component for that, because just having them be able to compete among, more like organizations so that they're not competing against just the big, so that the big guys are always like, but, bullying them out. But if we're not also sort of helping them become better or more established or learn or whatever, then it doesn't feel like we're completing the whole process,
Yeah.
with them. It feels like if we're just giving them the small guy pool to compete in, that's great, but that's only part of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I
So
agree.
I feel like we're missing the other part too.
So Caitlin and I are involved in there's a group of sort of grant managers around the county. We've mentioned a couple of times there's a bunch of grants now, like the race funding, the digital equity funding. So we've been trying to sort of collaborate as staff and are putting together some recommendations for sort of at the county leadership level. And that's one of them is the county really needs to have more of kind of an incubator for nonprofits. So BizLaunch, which is based out of the Economic Development Department, does some of that, but we think that there needs to be more of that. But this is a really bad budget year, so this is not the year that the county is going to be like, yes, we'll support that. But I think we should be doing that. So I think, for us talking about that and you all talking about that, hopefully we can get that up and running again because it was really helpful.
Mhm.
And it was really targeted. So a nonprofit might be, I want to work on board development or I want to work on fundraising or, it was kind of whatever they felt they needed to work on and they would have this dedicated resource to help them.
Mhm.
Right. Do we want to?
Links to talk about grant size and duration. Interested in your thoughts on this one, especially what is the optimal balance between fewer larger grants versus more smaller grants? I know it's up to the minimum dollar amount that nonprofits could receive from the grant. How do you think that's going? Should we adjust that? Obviously, the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to, so I think for what that means, people are missing out. So you have to make that hard decision of who do you cut, right? So, any other thoughts on that one?
Oh, Wendy has a thought.
Big surprise. So, I think that I thought we were sort of moving to fewer larger grants, not more smaller grants. But now we're kind of thinking that we'll somehow balance that with smaller grants for newer not-for-profits like that Jennifer had talked about when we can see more about the Alexandria program. And along those lines, because I think it's kind of linked to number 7, is should the county offer multi-year funding commitments? I think that as a group, we rely really heavily on the metrics that staff provides us for how well grantees are performing. And I'm not sure if we had multi-year grants, if we would really be able to hold grant recipients accountable for really producing in a year. So those are just my thoughts there. Thank you.
I'll flag that on the point of the potential incubator or startup grant, I'm not necessarily sold on the fact that those are smaller. Maybe they don't need to be smaller. Maybe they actually need to be similar. They're just for a different purpose. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to see what Alexandria does, but I don't know that that necessarily means like an incubator or a startup necessarily means a smaller grant.
Mhm.
So it might not balance it, and we still might be in this fewer larger grants category.
I think the balance that we had this year was fine. And I wouldn't go towards smaller grants because I think we've got small enough ones as it is. So, I mean, I sometimes have a little consternation over the 100,000 grants, but those are loans and that's just sort of a different category, so I get over it. And 7, I would agree with Wendy. I think we have a few that are multiple year grants, but I can't remember why that is.
AHIF.
Oh, it's the AHEF. Okay. Yeah, and all the rest of them are a year, right? Yeah, I think we stick with that. That's my opinion.
As I said, I might be interested in like a 2-year grant for maybe these startups, but
Okay.
the existing ones or the regular ones or whatever they're called, I agree with you. Stick with 1. And I'm not sold on the 2. I just would be interested in thinking about whether a startup might get a 2-year grant.
What I was thinking when I heard this was in terms of optimal balance, having a capped pool for that more seed money, which I'm still in favor of. And I don't think needs to contradict giving larger grants to more established or effective organizations. And that ties to 7. I can't recall when this has happened or where it happened, but for multi-year, I imagine that's more for exceptional cases where there's high leverage, high impact, but also it takes some more time and it's with a capable organization. I imagine disbursements tied to different outcomes throughout those years. So I'm fine with multi-year when those controls are in place. And then for the balance, I don't have the answer for large grants, but I still am in favor of that seed pool for smaller organizations trying to get off the ground who may need more support, not just monetarily, but maybe county support.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. Anyone have any other thoughts there? Just have 2 more questions. We just kind of wanted to get a more of a sense about, your thoughts on whether eligibility should be restricted based on organizational capacity. We already talked about this a little bit. And I think we do this a little bit, but I'm just sort of curious how, ingrained it should be in our process. It's pretty, it's not as, we don't really look at it from, you guys see the past performance when you're reviewing applications, but it's not necessarily like a question. There's no scoring tied to it. But I'm just sort of curious if that needs to be more, of a rigid evaluation criteria. If there needs to be more sort of transparency about how we're looking at capacity and past performance. What do you guys think?
I think yes. You don't want an organization coming here with asking for money for 5 people where they could combine their efforts with another group, 5 and have 10, because 5 that's like getting somebody off the street there, hey, come on, I need y'all to come in and be part of this group for a little while. That's just personally. I could be wrong. I don't have a problem with somebody saying you're wrong, but I think I gotta eliminate some of these groups just starting up because they know they can get funding for saying they got 2 people. We just thought they not said how many they have. They asked for $35,000 and they don't have anything in the office. Don't have but one. Don't you have one person?
I don't think it's if either or, it's both.
I think, so I'm gonna be a little bit of the, hard line on this one. So I think if we are pulling out the sort of newbies and less experienced, that for the folks that are in that category, I'm okay saying, now we'd have to figure out what the bar is for capacity or for past performance, really past performance. But I'm okay with saying, like, if you're not above like this level, if you've, had several grants with us and you've missed your mark on them each and every time, and maybe there's other factors like, you're terrible at reporting and whatever. I'm okay saying, you can't apply or,
So I guess my question is about, like, when I read should eligibility be? I read that, like, unless you meet a certain criteria, you are not eligible to submit an application. That
Okay,
feels,
maybe that's the wrong.
that feels.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking.
My answer to that would be.
I'm thinking that it teases into that pre-app process that we created, that in that pre-app part, that's where that comes out, and that would take them out of the moving on to that next phase, because, sorry, Charlie, you guys are bad performers or malperformers.
That's it, right with you, Laura?
Yeah, so if it's more about should past performance and organization capacity be considered
Yeah.
in moving through the process?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I guess the last question is really about does it make sense to incentivize collaborative? We've kind of tried in the past. It kind of seemed like when we were talking about this in our smaller group of the spring that we didn't really care to kind of continue that encouraging collaborative proposal, but I just kind of wanted to revisit it from is that sort of where we stand, or do we want to, is this something that we think is important? And by collaborative proposals, we mean like encouraging organizations to pool resources and come in, with a single program idea.
Empirically, collaboration yields more creative and better product. When you have competition between 2 partnering entities, they will strive to better the other, and you'll get far better results.
It seems like we should encourage it, don't worry about incentivizing
Yeah.
it, because
I don't
is true ground, who are they gonna collaborate with to provide the resident service?
Yeah,
Like, some of the programs just don't lend.
I think it's too hard in the diversity of the projects that we have.
It would be interesting if you had like a smaller organization, for example. Smaller startups a lot tonight that like maybe had the ideas and the knowledge of communities, but didn't have as many resources and partnered with a bigger nonprofit to do a program like that. be an interesting situation that would fall under.
And that's what some of the ones that we don't fund, like CYEP and stuff, they partner with the different apartment groups. And stuff like that down in Green Valley. And, maybe that would make them an actual candidate for the smaller program. Well, and there have been ones like, what was the other one? There was CYEP and that other one that came in for both funding at the same year, and we were like, they're the same thing. Like and we had sort of said like they should just go together and Green Valley. Yeah. Portia's probably that one. She changes every year. Yeah. So, but I don't think we can incentivize it.
Right. Is there anything else any final thoughts that you guys have about our process, the structure of the community development fund, other things we should be considering? I thought this was really helpful.
I just like the fact that we're being part of it and you listen to our ideas. That makes a difference. And I get a chance to hear intelligent people down there.
Well, as a reminder, I'll just share the final slide one more time. Yeah, here we are. We will send out a notification once the draft plan has been published. We're aiming for early February. There's going to be a big sort of feedback that we'll be taking to capture feedback on the plan. And I think you guys have seen a lot of where we're headed, and but it's a large document. So, and yeah, we will let you know what those feedback opportunities are, and you guys will obviously be heavily involved. Have a chair report.
I have no chair
Report. Okay. My only staff report. Oh, Jennifer, did you want to share something?
Do you want to do your staff report? We
I was
might
just
have the same staff report.
You probably don't. We have a new representative for the Community Services Board, who will be taking Steve's spot. She's got a similar background to Steve, and she couldn't make this meeting, but she will be with us in February. We're still looking for members for the co-mod category. That one is very tricky to recruit for. So
can do another.
You've done a lot.
Email to the chairs of the neighborhood groups.
Yes. Jennifer?
Yeah, we are getting ready for our favorite night of the year. So April will be doing our bus tour. So just wanted to get thoughts on any places that you all would like to visit. Is there anything that you've had this burning desire to visit?
Disney World?
And you can think about it. We can ask again in February, but we'll start kind of thinking about good places to visit, places we haven't been in a while. We try to sort of do a nice mix of maybe a housing project and some public service kind of stuff, CDBG, CSBG. So I guess just think about that and we can revisit next month.
Should go to one of the Kitchen for Purposes food trucks and get dinner.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, but I would love to see, would love to visit. They do catering.
We went there a few years ago and they fed us. It was lovely.
They closed their little cafe for now. Yeah, they do. Yeah.
We don't need the dental stuff, have we?
That's what I was gonna say. I always want to see us about the dental van.
We tried last year. Maybe if we get them early enough, maybe we should reach out.
It was like a timing issue with them or something, but if we ask soon, maybe.
Because they don't actually own the van, and so it's like, anyway, so there was like a scheduling, but yeah, maybe if we get them early enough, they'll be able to work it into their schedule.
Well, the other question is based on the discussion around homelessness. whether any like path forward or live or anything would be, ones to visit in any way, shape or form.
Okay.
We can look into that. For the path forward, we fund sort of a case management scattered site things. I don't know about visiting. But yeah, we can think about that.
Okay. Yeah, well, if you think of anything else, let us know and we'll get started on it.
I like the wake of small businesses. Like
Yeah.
just the people, the actual individual into the chiropractor.
Yeah. I thought that was good. Yeah. And we could do a different one over it. We could
Yeah.
do like LEDC or something.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Any member reports? Great. Sure.
Is that officially?
I'll stop the recording, so.